All right, good evening, everyone. We are ready to start. Pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the school committee will be conducted via hybrid participation. We will post an audio recording, audio-video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of these proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting on the City of Somerville website and local cable access government channels. With that, we will start with a call to order and with a moment of silence and a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Dr. Ackman, Mayor Ballantyne, Ms. Pitone, Mr. Green, here. Ms. Diane,
here.
Ms. Barish,
Here.
President Owen Campen, Dr. Phillips,
Here.
Chair Cripson.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great, thank you. That brings us to introduction of interpreters. I believe we have, okay. So Portuguese interpreter, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Very well. Alô, good evening. My name is Ben Cruz. I'll be your Portuguese interpreter for this evening. Alô, boa noite. Meu nome é Ben Cruz. Eu serei o seu intérprete português nessa noite.
Thank you. And then we also have Haitian Creole. Haitian Creole, if you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Good evening, Stephanie Agustin, Haitian Creole interpreter. Bonjour, nom c'est Stéphanie Augustin, assure assez moi pour l'interpréter pour nous.
Thank you. And our Spanish interpreter, please.
Good evening, team. This is your Spanish interpreter, Tracy Pichardo. Hola, buenas noches. Este es el intérprete de español, Tracy Pichardo.
Great, thank you so much. With that, that brings us to our student advisory representatives. Are they here with us? Okay, if they join, please let me know. That brings us to public comment. Do we have any public commenters signed up? Okay, but before we move on, I am going to make a quick statement about what happened with public comment last week. So before we get started tonight, I would like to take a moment to address some controversy that arose during public comment at our last meeting. I made a split-second decision to cut off a public comment because the topic was not under the purview of the school committee. In retrospect, I should have given a warning and not immediately cut off the mic. It was a poor decision that caused unnecessary harm. For that, I'm truly sorry. I am still new to the job of school committee chair and still on the steep part of the learning curve. Moving forward, I pledge to make sure to share our public comment policy before public comment and to give ample warning to the speaker before cutting them off. Our public comment policy clearly states that comments should be on topics under the purview of the school committee. This is why I let one speaker continue and not the second speaker. Global conflicts are not the purview of the school committee. The role of the school committee is very specific: SPS budget, policy, hiring and firing of the superintendent, and labor negotiations. The first speaker kept their comments wholly within the context of classroom teaching. The second began their remarks by speaking about the conflict in Palestine and didn't get to the connection to Somerville until well after I cut off his mic. I want to be especially clear that when I say that something isn't the purview of the school committee, that doesn't mean that we, as individual humans, don't care or aren't equally disturbed by those events. I know this war is very personal, painful, and frightening for many in our community. Finally, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that this incident has highlighted how difficult this topic is to talk about. While global politics are not under the purview of the school committee's how our schools teach about them is. I understand that, the district understands that, and we will work to get educators as much support as possible. With that, that brings us to the report of the superintendent.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Oh, you may. Sorry.
First of all, thank you for your words. But as someone who's been on the other side of that learning curve, I feel obligated to say to my colleagues that part of our job, and I wasn't there last week and I apologize for that, is to be a support in the chair in making split-second, unclear rulings. The chair can only do as much as the committee allows and doesn't allow. And I know in my shoes, having made split-second calls and sometimes gotten them wrong in hindsight, it really helps if members, if they think the chair is in error, or even if they think the chair is making an unclear decision that may require a little more time to think about, just asks, hey, chair, you sure about that? Why? It helps the whole body. It helps the chair, and ultimately it helps the community. And I can't speak for Chair Krepshin, but I know that when I was in those tough places, it wasn't felt as a criticism. It was felt really as a support and a way of making sure that I got it right. So, I would encourage members to don't feel bad about using your right to, at the very least, inquire about a chair's rulings, and if necessary, even push back.
Thank you for that. And now that brings us to the report of the superintendent. Dr. Carmona?
Good evening, everyone. I am really excited. We have 3 topics to discuss today: the early education update from our team in the early childhood program, and our student health and survey, also from Matt Mitchell, who is going to enlighten us on the challenges that we face, especially for our middle school students. And so let's start with Kathleen Baylor with her team. So I'm really thrilled. This is an amazing report that I am quite sure you'll find enlightening. So thank you, Kathleen.
So, thank you, Chair Krepshin, and to the school committee, everybody, for the opportunity to present this evening, and to the support of our superintendent, our assistant superintendent of academics, and our executive assistant. Thank you all. Many of you are familiar with the Somerville Early Education as parents and longtime committee members as well. We're excited to update you as stakeholders in our continued quality improvement and programming innovation. Tonight, we will share who we are, why we do this work, what our model looks like, and how we support teachers to help our 3- and 4-year-olds in Somerville learn and grow. So first off, I would like to acknowledge the early childhood department members on our team. During this presentation, you will hear from many of them. So we'll take turns coming up and speaking and sharing our slides tonight. First off, we have our instructional coaches, Valerie Giltonen, Jessica Ferris, and Abby Morales. Our Early Childhood Grant Administrative Project Coordinator and Administrative Assistant, Gina D'Annunzio. We have our itinerant team, including Access Specialist, Katie Gately-Gahant, Board Certified Behavior Analyst, Nirali Chotu, and Speech and Language Pathologist, Liz Dean. And then we also have our Curriculum Lending Library Consultant, Bruce Johnson, and our Lending Library Coordinator, Michelle Anzalone. That makes up our team. So we've grown over this past year, and we have a lot to share with you tonight to celebrate with you. And I appreciate the entire team's putting together this presentation, and all those who could be present tonight. We're incredibly fortunate to have such a talented and dedicated team working hard to support our youngest learners. Should I keep going, or are we having a technical issue with the slides?
Try to enlarge the size.
Okay, sure, I can wait. here we are. Here's the team, or most of the team there. It looks like it's still loading. Is that?
I can see it fine, like on my laptop.
Okay. Let me know if you want me to wait. Go. Yay, great. In education, we call that wait time, and it's always so uncomfortable when you're waiting for, you're waiting for your students to say something. It's just that tension there. So thank you, Executive Assistant Batista there. So that's our team, and we'll go to the next slide. So Somerville Early Ed Department is a mixed delivery system, a cross-sector collaboration that supports children and families prenatal through school entry. With a long history of community collaboration, our Somerville Early Ed aligns quality learning opportunities and wraparound services for all Somerville's 3- and 4-year-olds. We've developed a cross-sector approach to our work under One Somerville Every Child initiative, and as a by all means community with the Harvard Education Redesign Lab. We believe that working collaboratively with city, schools, and community partners maximizes the impact of our work. And this is a true celebration, this collective impact that we're going to present tonight. The slideshow shows the departments involved. This slide shows our departments involved in our cross-sector collaboration. We regularly, I think it's the first, yeah, that one. Great. All right. Yes, and we can go to the next slide. And we partner through the First Five Committee, and we're a subcommittee to the Children's Cabinet. So the next slide shows our timeline, and this is super interesting. I partnered with Nomi Davidson on this timeline, and she shared the early histories of our Somerville Early Ed Department, and I thought it would be great to show you the long history we have here in Somerville. So beginning in 1970, we committed to offering pre-K and K early education via half-day model. And then we expanded our offering to serve children with disabilities in 1988. From 1996 to 2009, the Somerville Community Partnerships for Children laid the foundation for our current Somerville Partnership for Young Children, which we call SBYC. Grant funding enabled us to extend support through childcare subsidies, professional development, and mental health services. Between 2000 and 2016, the establishment of the Early Ed Department enhanced the curriculum, initiated parent workshops, formally partnered with Head Start, and introduced kindergarten entry skills assessment. In more recent years, the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiative, which is known as CPPI, and GLEAM, which I thank you for approving just recently, the GLEAM grant here, sharpened our focus on kindergarten readiness, high-quality programming, and has allowed us to provide comprehensive support to the public school and community educators. So our next slide. This is the one that I was thinking about. So we partner with 9 centers overall, and you can see all of those centers. Community collaboration is the cornerstone of the Somerville Partnership for Young Children, and it was formalized in 2019 with the Commonwealth Partnership Preschool Initiative funding. And SBYC is a collaboration between the public schools, the Somerville Family Learning Collaborative, Head Start, and other city departments. So we're really proud of this collaboration. We keep growing our partners each year, and this year we added the Somerville Child Care Center as a formal partner to SBYC. I will now pass the floor on to Gina D'Annunzio, who will share with you more about who we are.
Thank you, Kathleen. Here at SPYC and the Somerville Public Schools, we believe that building bridges and connecting communities through a shared vision will effectively meet a range of needs among Somerville's children and families. We proudly serve a multitude of families and strive to create inclusive spaces where every child's potential is recognized and celebrated. Of the over 500 children, SPYC children, 313 started their educational journey in our public preschools program this year, and 190 in our community-based centers. SPYC children and families represent diverse economic, cultural, linguistic backgrounds with 30 home languages. Next slide, please. Oh, 2 more. Sorry. 1 more. Our Somerville public preschool classrooms are currently at 80% capacity with 313 children enrolled in the programs across the district. Steady uptick of enrollment from school year 23 to 24 indicates a strong demand for high-quality early education in our district. In response to the growing demand, 2 additional classrooms opened this year for children on the autism spectrum with specially designed instruction in an inclusive, high-quality learning environment. Next slide, please. Of the 379 kindergartners currently enrolled, only 9% entered this year without prior preschool experience. The majority, 45%, came from Somerville Public Schools preschool classrooms, and 31% came from other child care centers across Somerville. We strive to create a seamless transition with a strong foundation for school readiness and lifelong learning. I'll pass it back to Kathleen to share our why.
Thank you, Gina. All right, now that you know who we are, before getting to what our model looks like and how we support educators, I just wanted to share our why as it grounds our work. So if you can go to the next slide. So our why resonates with the district's instructional vision and school committee goals. It was created by the GLEAM leadership team. And it says, we believe children are competent, capable, and curious, and have the right to a warm, welcoming, inclusive, high-quality learning environment. Together, our goal is to support educators in planning and implementing aligned, intentional instruction to foster children's curiosity, language, literacy, and love for learning. And it was important for us as we were creating this why to have our vision centered in the image of the child, grounded in the love for and joy of learning. So I will now pass it on to our instructional coaches who will talk about what our model is and how we support teachers to help our 3- and 4-year-olds in Somerville learn and grow. So Abby's first.
Hi, thanks. Can you move on to the next slide, please? So at the core of Somerville Early Learning is a robust teaching and learning framework, and it's informed by the most up-to-date research on neuroscience and some established understandings of how young children thrive and learn. You can see here, it's really built on these pillars of listed here, so centered on whole child learning, a strong focus on anti-bias, learning through play, grounded in the 4 intentions, which are our powerful instructional practices, and have flexible, adjustable, and multiple entry points. And you'll also see these qualities repeated and resonating through our teaching and learning that comes through our coaching and professional development. Next slide, please. So In order for this model to be the most effective, it really has to go beyond sort of a list of qualities, and it really is this dynamic interplay between what we value and what we hold as important and what we believe about teaching and learning that are manifested and actionable in those powerful instructional practices, and that children experience in a daily curriculum components. And we believe that when all of these are interacting and that teachers and children are in this relationship of values and practices, that in that way, every child, every day, and every way can really thrive as learners. Next slide, please. So big ideas. In C, children engage with these big ideas. Again, from what we know from research and from anyone who's ever been in an early childhood classroom, children really don't learn in silos. Their brains are constantly trying to put things in relationship to one another. And so big ideas really help maximize that task that young children are interacting with. And these topics are relevant to their lives and their communities, and they also allow for project-based learning, which again really sets the stage for lifelong learning for young children. And this year, what we've been really focused on is refining those big ideas and the big idea guides, and have been very intentional in developing instructional materials that are culturally and diverse, with diverse representation, that have multiple access points, and that are highly accessible to different populations. Next slide, please. So how do we operationalize our framework? So one of our really key instructional resources that we provide is a curriculum pacing guide. So this guide provides between approximately 4 to 6 weeks of Tier 1 instructional content that's scoped and sequenced through academic and social emotional skills, and they are aligned to the Massachusetts state guidelines. Our pre-K classrooms, they use building blocks for the math curriculum, handwriting without tears, and second step for the social emotional piece. And these guides are continually developed through an iterative process in collaboration with teachers, literacy consultants, instructional leaders, and with multiple feedback loops. Next slide, please. So this pacing guide, these pacing guides also include sample weekly schedules, and that progress through some essential literacy practices, because we've really identified as focusing on early literacy, developing early literacy this year. Such as, for example, here, oral language and concept development. We've built the content through the use of anchor texts that ground the content. So teachers can choose to follow the anchor text curriculum maps that we provide, or alternatively, they can surface those big ideas from children's interests and the use of data and observation, which we also support teachers in developing that practice as well. And I'm going to now pass it on to one of the other instructional coaches to tell you about some of the other great initiatives we've got going on.
Thanks, Abby. So to support the, actually, can we go to the next slide, please? To support the curriculum and the pacing guides and the anchor text, we now have a curriculum lending library. So this year, the teachers can borrow big idea kits with materials, guides, and resources with responsive scaffolds. And you can see an example of one of our kits here. It is the transportation kit. And it's anti-bias focus, and it is full of materials, so teachers don't have to gather materials. The materials have been gathered for them. Next slide. And these kits were created for the Somerville Early Educational Community by the Somerville Early Educational Community. So teams of educators came together from across the city, from our center partners and our public school classrooms, and they met regularly to develop these kits. So next slide. So one of the key aspects of creating equity and access for all of our teachers we serve is through coaching and professional development. So currently we're supporting 38 classrooms with transformational coaching based on the work of Elena Aguilar's The Art of Coaching. And this strengths-based model approach maximizes teacher agency, reflective practice, and equity. And in addition, we have robust PLCs. Next slide, please. The 4 district early childhood PLCs are a valuable opportunity for teachers to collaborate, leverage peer expertise, and foster shared best practice. An anticipated shift in the school year 24-25 with more half-day Wednesdays that will allow for more dedicated time for PLCs, wider membership, and more cross-school collaboration. In addition, we have community PLCs. Next slide, please. Kate Kane leads our SPYC Center Director of PLCs. Directors are supported as instructional leaders with the ultimate goal of raising quality and school readiness across all preschool programs. Kate also provides professional development to our SPYC community partners on par with those offered to our Somerville Public School educators. And you can see here one of our PD work that Kate Kane has worked on in one of our partner programs. Now I'm going to pass it back to Kathleen, who will talk about data-driven programming. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. So next slide. What you see here on this slide are our preschool assessment tools, and we use 3 of them. So we use the class, and that measures student-adult interactions. We use the preschool report card used in our public school classrooms, which measures children's progression and skills. And then we have our PELI, our preschool early literacy screener, which we're piloting in 3 of our public school classrooms and 7 of our community partner classrooms. And it measures key early literacy skills, all of which inform curriculum, coaching, and PD offerings. PELI meets the GLEAM grant requirements for a universal literacy screener. It aligns with our literacy curriculum and our multi-tiered system of supports. It also has accommodations for students with disabilities and English language learners. Our plan is to implement the PELI screener in all pre-K classrooms that we partner with and our public school classrooms. And we're working with educators right now, and especially the GLEAM leadership team for this rollout. So when we do implement the PELI, it will be a universal screening across all of our partner centers and all of our preschool classrooms, which right now we do not have. So we recognized that we didn't have something that measures that crosses both systems. So we're really excited about this pilot this year. Next slide. So this year we launched a multi-tiered system of support in our partner centers with an itinerant team supporting access, quality, and wraparound services towards universal kindergarten readiness. It came about to meet the needs of our students in our partner centers and is funded this year under the Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Grant. One of the strands of the grant is to support equitable access to early education and inclusion, and that's a critical part of this grant. And so we are mandated to build an itinerant team and to place this itinerant team in our partner centers. So that's just an important background knowledge to know. Our MTSS framework provides proactive supports to students, knowing that early intervention is critical in the early years. The MTSS flowchart that you see on the right-hand side of this slide, it shows how all learners receive a strong Tier 1 curriculum. So that means that's our foundation curriculum that Valerie and Abby just shared with you. So everybody's receiving this curriculum. Some children might need additional supports, so they might receive some intervention in small groups or individually. And then some children might even need more individualized support, so they would have more intensive intervention. And children may progress from tiers 1 to 3, while others may start at 3 with intense intervention and intense support, but over time will need less. So these tiers should and can be flexible. In addition to providing intervention, we're also implementing a program design that ensures full inclusion of children with special needs across all settings, including a commitment to the concept that inclusion is first, a belief that everyone belongs, regardless of need or perceived ability, and that all are valued and contributing members of the school community. Providing on-site special education services in our partner centers reduces the number of transitions in a child's day for those families who require a longer day of care. So I'd like to introduce you now to our itinerant team who are traveling around the city to provide both interventions and special education services. So our first member, she's not able to be here tonight. Her son is in a playoff basketball game. So that was important for her. So I promised that I would introduce her here. So her name is Katie Gately Gahan, a school psychologist. She is, she's been serving in Somerville Public Schools for 7 years as a school psychologist. Thank you for changing the slide. And now she's our access specialist under this itinerant model. In this new role, she's the point person for the MTSS system. She conducts observations in preschool settings, supports the administration of universal screening assessments, and interprets results. She also makes recommendations for student success based on data and helps to foster an understanding of child development and learning styles. She provides direct services to students in the classroom who might need support in accessing the curriculum. In her words, it has also been very exciting to use my clinical skills to provide consultation around the special education referral and evaluation process. So I'll hand it off to the rest of the team so they can introduce themselves. So next up is Liz Dean.
Thank you, Kathleen. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Dean, and I'm a Massachusetts licensed speech-language pathologist on the itinerant team this year. In this role, I directly service students on individualized education plans, or IEPs, at our partner centers. I also observe, screen, consult, and provide short-term intervention, which can be 4-, 6-, or 8-week plans to support children at our partner centers through MTSS. And now I'm going to pass it on to Nurali.
Hi, I'm Nurali Chotu, and I am a Massachusetts licensed board-certified behavior analyst on the itinerant team. Within this role, I consult our partner center directors and teachers for children aged 3 to 5 who engage in any interfering behaviors that prevent them from thriving in their current environment. I also support Somerville Public School classrooms by facilitating data collection that will aid in creating, developing, and implementing behavior plans in pre-K to 2nd grade classrooms. And now I will pass it back to Kathleen.
Thank you, Liz and Nurali. This is a highly, if you can tell, this is a highly specialized team. They have an enormous amount of clinical knowledge that they bring to the early childhood department and to our partner centers. They conduct observations in preschool settings. They administer our universal screening assessments. They make recommendations based on data. They foster an understanding of child development and learning styles. And then they've also developed a comprehensive referral and tracking system to monitor interventions, child progress, and outcomes. So we are really fortunate to have them as a part of us. So, what's next for early childhood? While our data shows that we have a strong system that prepares many preschoolers to meet kindergarten readiness benchmarks, we continue to work towards equity across all of our populations. We will continue to use data to drive instruction, revise our curriculum materials, coordinate support for our students, and support our teachers through coaching and professional development. It's our aspiration to cultivate learning experiences that value and empower children and families in their full intersectional identities, to feel a sense of connection and demonstrate a passion and curiosity for learning and apply learning in authentic and meaningful ways. So, does anyone have any questions for our team? And thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation and for all of you for being here with us tonight. I know you've had a long day already. So we will take questions now. Looks like Ms. Dion.
Thank you so much for this presentation. I love the curriculum lending library. I think that's such a great idea. Like, having been a teacher myself for so long, it's like I feel like, you know, each teacher kind of has their own resources in their own classroom, but it makes a lot more sense to have like a lending library that everyone can kind of take and borrow from. I also loved seeing that you're offering like PLCs and PD for the educators at the private preschools, at the community partner preschools as well. I had a question. So the community partner preschools, do Somerville children get like free or reduced cost tuition at those programs? Like, how does that work?
Some. So we, as I said in the earlier slide, we partner with the City of Somerville, and the City of Somerville under Summer Promise has the Child Access and Affordability Program. So I think we have roughly about 30 children who are placed in our partner centers who are getting absolutely free tuition. And it is wonderful. And that's because of ARPA funding. So we are working with Summer Promise right now to identify how we're going to sustain this tuition funding in years to come.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Green and then Ms. Patone.
Again, thank you. So, you know, currently we have early childhood scattered between our K-8 schools and, of course, the Capuano. And I am curious, both as a parent who, you know, made a decision about where my kid would go to preschool, but also as a member of a body that has to make some very serious building decisions over the next year or so. Has there been any exploration of the difference, both in the experience of the kids who say went to Capuano versus going to one of the neighborhood schools, both in that class, but also as they've gone through? Like, one of the reasons I chose to send my kid to the Healy, actually, she was taught by Jessica Ferris, who, in all fairness, if my daughter's given a choice, she'd go live with Jessica Ferris right now, was because we knew that's where she went. We wanted her to go to school, K-8, and it just seemed like getting rid of one less transition was in her best interest. And I just wonder if we've seen any data on different experiences based on...
We've done extensive data analysis for early childhood, and we've seen that robustly, our children are meeting our kindergarten readiness benchmarks across our system. With that said, there are certain populations, we've drilled down to some of our demographic populations, and there's certain populations that aren't making as much growth in our preschool year, but we have not seen that it's based off of an individual classroom by any means. It's more demographically. Students who might be coming from low-income families haven't made as much growth. Students who are identifying with disabilities haven't made as much growth. So one of our English language learners, so one of the things that we've been doing as a department is we've really been thinking deeply about these learners and how do we provide this achievement for all learners. That the curriculum lending library was a result of that. We also saw that we wanted everybody to have access to high-quality materials and to level that playing field with that. But also our pacing guides, all of our materials, we've been partnering with our special education teachers and looking at our curriculum lending library kits and making sure that they're accessible for all learners to boost everybody up. Our PELI is going to be very, very important, that preschool literacy indicator assessment, because that will help us target interventions for the children who might not be meeting benchmark. And we have, over the course of the year, we have multiple opportunities to do quick checks with this assessment and to support our educators to meet the needs of all children. So I think as far as quality, we are working on making sure that our quality is equitable across all of our partner centers and classrooms. That's obviously still a work in progress, but that is the goal, and that is what we're striving for. Did that answer your question? Sort of? Okay.
So, sorry, to say something. So when we're thinking about, as we have in the past, the policy choice between centering all of our pre-K and K classrooms in one place versus scattering them through the classrooms, we haven't seen any difference in how that affects student performance and behavior, is what you're saying?
As far as student performance, no. As far as it does affect families, though, very, very much. And so when our students enter into any one of our schools, they become part of that school family. And then to be able to stay in that school is a real benefit to the family. Often our students have siblings in the school, and so that also supports the family aspect. But ideally, if we're all doing our jobs correctly, then the quality of education of somebody at Healy, as you mentioned, to Capuano should be and is the same in that way.
Thank you.
I have Ms. Patone and then Ms. Dion.
Thank you, through you, Chair Krepchen. I just want to first compliment and thank everybody for coming out. It is really, I know it's time in your busy schedule, but it's really nice for us to, I guess, kind of pseudo-meet all of you, and you have the opportunity to speak to your work, and so I just want to compliment and say that we really value that, so thank you. I had a question about kindergarten readiness and what you may or may not be seeing relative to SPS students, partner students, and I think there's about another 15% that are not partners, because obviously it's very challenging to be partners with every provider. And what are you seeing you said you're seeing demographic differences, but are you seeing any differences, and have there been trends and changes in those differences through the years as the partnerships have evolved?
Yes, there have been. And I do have a full presentation on our data. I'm happy to come back and actually share that with you, but I can give a summary. So overall, we've been tracking our partnership data since 2015, and what we've seen is, I mentioned the class assessment that measures quality of the classroom, and especially the adult-student interactions. Back in 2015, it was our public school and our center partners were off on some measures, but over time, we've seen them come in alignment together, and they're pretty similar overall. Sometimes our partner centers have stronger scores in certain aspects, and our public school educators might have stronger scores in other aspects. But overall, that data is growing, it's increasing. We're really proud of that fact. We've been targeting professional development on some of those class indicators, and we've seen changes, especially in the instructional format. So it measures emotional, like how educators meet the emotional needs of the children, and also the instructional needs of the children. I think that's one of the big indicators. overall. As far as our kindergarten readiness and our kindergarten entry, we have been also tracking that data for quite a long time. I think the earliest was 2017, if I'm correct. And that has been extremely consistent. And it was surprising, even during the pandemic, we did not see dips in our kindergarten readiness. And I think, our child care centers were open during the pandemic, and they were meeting the needs of the children. So I do think that shows the hard work that they've been putting in, and that the kindergarten readiness, it's the majority, it's around like 80%, most of the children are ready. What we're seeing, there are some demographics, as I mentioned, those are really consistent, that some populations that are not showing the same readiness as their peers. And those are the children that we were mentioning that we're really wanting to support educators in boosting up those readiness scores. And then, and that's measured through our KESI, our Kindergarten Entry Skills Inventory. So I think, yeah.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. I don't want to speak for the body, but I don't know if there's an ability to get us, like, not necessarily come in, the chair can decide whether they want someone to come back, but even just a brief memo around that data. Something that we always talk about is we made huge investments in early childhood, and our instincts are always 100% yes, but as we collect data that is showing that our investments are generating results, that's really helpful to us as we move forward and continue to look at investments and where, we want to put resources. So that would be helpful, and you guys can decide if it's a memo or...
Okay. I'm happy to do whatever is best for the superintendent and the school committee.
I have Ms. Dion and then Ms. Barish.
So I'm wondering, I'm trying to think how to word it. How does a child care center become a community partner? Is there a process that they kind of have to go through with you? How does that piece work?
So they usually, well, a few things. So we partner, and I partner very closely with Chris Hosman from Summer Promise. He's the director of Summer Promise. And he just has a new position of a child care coordinator, and her job is to connect all of the child cares in Somerville. And so she's actually going door to door to door to say hello, to meet people, to explain that there is this network called the Somerville Partnership for Young Children, and we'd like you to be a part of it if you're interested. We have open meetings where anybody can come to our meetings, our SBYC meetings, and what we find is that directors will start coming to our meetings, they get to know us a little bit, and then that relationship develops, and then we move forward for a formal partnership. We have a formalized MOU process, and Chris Hosman and I sit down with new partners, and we go through the responsibilities and the expectations, and then that process is formalized. Exciting. Gina D'Annunzio has created these really great certificates now for our partner centers, so thank you, Gina, and stickers. So we wanted to celebrate that there are partners and for our public to know that they're also partners. So each partner center now will be getting a certificate, and they will also be getting a sticker for their door, showing that partnership. So hopefully it will spread, but I think it's also important to increase it slowly as well, because this is grant funded. A lot of the team that you met tonight are grant funded, and so we want to make sure that we're not increasing our capacity, and we're not we're going deeper rather than wider and not as effective.
Great, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and just, can I go back to Ms. Baton, one thing I forgot to say that is really important is that in our data, we do see a really obvious difference in children. I think there's 9% of our kindergartners who have not been in school. Those children are coming in at a definite deficit if they have not been in any kind of formalized childcare. That is a clear picture in all of the data, and that's been consistent through the years. Yeah.
Ms. Parrish?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Kupchan, thank you for the presentation. It was beyond being, besides being informative, it's also just really visually pleasing and easy to digest, so I appreciate that. I was actually going to ask about that 9% that you just mentioned. Do you know why they're not attending preschool? Is it, financial barriers, or they're new to town so they don't get signed up in time, or their parents just want to be home with them?
We haven't drilled down. That 9% equals about 33 children. And so a good portion of those 33 children are newcomers. So that's a big piece of the reason why they haven't had prior preschool experience. But we haven't gone into every single child and investigated why. But that could be something that we could focus on.
I have Dr. Phillips and then Ms. Dion.
Thanks. Through you, Chair, just listening to the conversation about gaps and growth and sort of just wondering, what kind of summer programming do we offer pre-K families that are going to kindergarten but aren't in special education?
Yep. So our department runs Summer Explore over the summer. It's for preschoolers going into kindergarten and kindergartners going into first grade. And it's about a 4 to 5 week program, depending on the dates of the summer, 5 days a week, and they go a full school day. And we also run an extended day program, part of Summer Explore, to meet the childcare needs of our families. And then the children, obviously, who are in our partner centers are still going over the summer into those. They're participating in their centers all the way up until the start of kindergarten. Yeah.
Ms. Dion?
I have a follow-up question from Ms. Parrish's question, talking about students who aren't attending preschool. You mentioned before there are about 30 kids that are on a free or reduced rate. Are there families who apply for a free and reduced rate and aren't able to get it just because of limited amounts of money? Or does everyone who kind of qualifies, do they get it no matter how many people it is, or is there a limit to how many people can qualify for that?
Yeah, there is. The Child Care Access and Affordability Program is limited. Unfortunately, I think they had many more applications than we had the ability to fund. Yeah, so that is unfortunate. There is a need out here for this, and I know it's been talked about a lot in the news, and I know the state is working on trying to provide more subsidies as well.
Thank you for that. Yeah, because like you said, preschool is the great equalizer.
Yes,
absolutely.
It is. I have seen, though, over the course of my 3 years, is that I've seen our 4-year-olds, as you saw in our enrollment slide that Gina presented. Last year I was here, and I think we were a little worried about the enrollment at Capuano, if I remember correctly, and now this year it really has grown. And so what I've noticed this year is that there are more children who are 4 coming and utilizing our public preschool program, and our partner centers, as a result of that, have more 3-year-olds, toddlers, and infants.
Ms. Parrish, did you have a question?
Thank you. I apologize if you touched on this in the presentation and I just missed it because I was, distracted. But one of the things I remember hearing in Children's Cabinet was the enormous impact that having the various service providers going into
the centers has on families, and I just wondered if you could touch upon that, if you didn't already. I don't think you did.
No,
but-
this is, no, it's really great to highlight it. Thank you for that. Is that the team, and Nirali and Liz, who you met, and Katie, who I introduced to you, it really is a great equalizer to families, because otherwise families, if they needed to access special education services, they would have to take time off of work and come to our public schools for walk-in services. And so what we're doing is we're providing services on site where the children are comfortable and feel safe, and then they and the services are happening during their school day on site at the child care center. So families do not have to leave work. They don't have to juggle that difficult process. So it is a mandate for the grant to have that. We are not the only community across the Commonwealth who's creating itinerant teams, and we're really excited about it. More and more services are being deployed right now, and we were just discussing as a team everybody's caseloads. But it's definitely needed. Families are thrilled, especially to have our speech and language services right on site. Yeah.
That's great. Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just had a question. It might not be for you, it might be for the superintendent or the enrollment office, but I was curious about the enrollment capacity numbers for both ECIP and AIM. I know historically ECIP was a very high-demand program. It seems like we're somewhat under-enrolled, and then my understanding is we've increased our capacity for AIM, but right now we have 30 for the 63 slots for the AIM program. So I'm just, I'm assuming pre-K and K, so I'm just curious if there's anything to share, or maybe this is a follow-up question.
I do know, so one of the things, it's tough to see these numbers right now in December, because the public schools are mandated to provide programming for children who turn 3. On their 3rd birthday, who qualify for special education and need an on-school experience, or we provide them through our itinerant model. But we do need to provide special education programming to our 3-year-olds who qualify for special education programming. So these numbers, by the time May comes, these classrooms might be completely full, because the children are turning 3, and we're working really closely with early intervention. So we know who's coming, to us a lot of the time, and then we're making sure that we have placements available to them. I do know that ECIP is pretty full at this time, though. It's much more than it was actually last year. And then the AIM classrooms everybody will also be growing until they're at full capacity. And that is the trajectory in all communities, because we're taking 3-year-olds, depending on their 3-year-old birthday.
Great, thank you for that. If there are no further questions, yep.
Thank you, through the chair. I just want to say thank you to Kathleen and her team for really being here. I have the pleasure of working very closely with Kathleen, so we meet regularly. And I have to say the thoughtfulness, the well-plannedness, the great design of this presentation is really how Kathleen approaches her work every day. So I think this was a little snippet into the work that I see you and the team doing regularly, and I just want to say thank you. I'm really excited for your leadership, Kathleen, for the collaboration with our other members of our curriculum team as we think about vertical alignment and really learning from a lot of the systems built here, including the MTSS model, for example. But this was just amazing to see, and many of your names come up in our every other week check-in regularly, so it's good to meet you in person as well. But just really huge shout out to your team and all the work that you're doing. Thank you, Kathleen.
Yeah, thank you so much, and it really is quite amazing. This team is highly talented, and I'm excited to be able to be a leader and have them all together. I mean, they inspire me daily, and they help us become stronger and meet the needs of our students. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you. Brings us, yep.
Great, thank you, Kathleen. And your team is welcome to stay, or you can actually have a graceful exit if you need to. Right now, we're going to switch to Matt Mitchell. He has a presentation for our Somerville Public Schools Student the Health Survey. This is a survey that we often quote in terms of our condition or getting the pulse of the social-emotional needs of our students in the middle school. So, Matt, I'm glad you're here. And so, all ears to you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I want to thank everybody for having me tonight. It's been a long day, to say the least, but it's nice to see everybody here, and I think this is like my 4th time doing this in the last 5 years, so I'm back, glad to be back. But for those that don't know, my name is Matt Mitchell. I'm the Prevention Services Manager with the City of Somerville's Health and Human Services Department. So while my main role focuses on substance misuse prevention, I will be talking about all aspects of the survey, which prevention helps serve as the liaison between our evaluator, John Snow Inc., JSI, and the Somerville Public Schools, who help partner to do and administer this survey every school year. We do alternate between middle and high school every year, so this was a middle school year in 2023. So to get started, we sample middle school students to 6th, 7th, and 8th. Could you put it in view mode by any chance? Might be helpful for me. Sorry. If not, I can pull it up on my laptop. Oh, appreciate it. All right. Thank you. Next slide, please. Oh. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, we alternate between years. So this year was a middle school administration year. And so the purpose of this presentation, we'll just do a highlight of some of the key middle school findings for the 8 domains that we cover. So that includes safety, discrimination, violence-related behaviors and experiences, mental health, substance use, sexual behaviors, physical activities, nutrition, and protective factors. So we partner with John Snow Inc., JSI for short, to develop the survey questions with support from community members, and then administer it electronically each year, where students are able to take it in class online rather than having paper versions. Next slide, please. The survey itself was administered to 766 middle school students who took it, which represents 77% of the total number of middle school students, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Their key terms there are just to help you as we go through and shorten the acronyms. Next slide. So again, this represents the numbers of individuals and kind of the categories and characteristics of each middle school student. So age 11 through 14 primarily, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity. So these are all questions that are asked, demographic questions asked at the beginning of the survey. Next slide. So just as we go through the report, this is what most of the slides are going to look like. There's going to be trend data along with age, gender, identity, sexual orientation, race, and ethnicity, as you will see on the screen. So the results, if you want 2 slides actually. First one we want to highlight is during the past 30 days, which was a question asked, on how many days did you not go to school because you felt you would be unsafe at school or on your way to and from school. And so you can see here, overall, 11% of middle school students reported skipping school because they felt unsafe on their way to and from. So you can see the trend data on the left. This is something that's kind of risen over time since 2011. Disregard 2013, that's not supposed to say 20%, that's supposed to say 5%. So it's supposed to say 7, 5, 6, 5, 7, 11 from 2011 to 2023. Age is there as well. Main differences that we saw, particularly among race, was Asian students were significantly less likely than the average middle school student to skip school because they felt unsafe, and as well as Hispanic Latino students were significantly more likely than non-Hispanic Latino students to skip school because they felt unsafe. Next question, or next slide. This question mostly asked about whether the individual felt that they were treated badly or unfairly based off of either of these conditions. So first one is race or ethnicity, second is gender identity, third is sexual orientation, and fourth is religion. So you can see overall 9% of middle school students reported they were sometimes, most of the time, or always treated badly or unfairly in school because of those categories. And it goes, as you see, 12%, 5%, 5%, 5%. So some of the notable things to note would be gender minority students were significantly more likely than the average middle school student to experience discrimination because of their sexual orientation, and significantly less likely than the average middle school to experience discrimination because of their religion. I won't read all of them there, but you can kind of see the trend among each category. Next slide. So the next one is violence-related behaviors. So this was, again, talking about during the last 12 months and how many days were you in a physical fight on school property. And so since 2011, it's been increasing, and it seems to appear that there are significant differences. There is an error here in terms of the written stuff below. So what I can highlight here is gender male students were significantly less likely than the average middle school student to have experienced sexual violence, and female and gender minority students were significantly more likely than the average middle school students. For sexual orientation, sexual minority students were significantly more likely than heterosexual students to have experienced sexual violence, and then American Indian and Alaska Native and Asian students were significantly less than the average middle school student to have experienced sexual violence, with Hispanic and Latino students also significantly more likely than non-Hispanic Latino students to have experienced sexual violence.
Are we talking about sexual violence, or are we talking about...
Oh, sorry, physical fighting. My apologies, I skipped to the next slide. Sorry, I skipped to the next slide, my apologies. So this one was the one where there were disregard where it says there are no significant differences, because there were significant differences, my apologies. Yeah, so I can repeat. So for the physical fighting, for the previous slide, there were no significant differences among the categories. And then for sexual violence, even though it says on the screen there were no significant differences, there are significant differences, which I just mentioned. And the next slide is talking about bullying. So again, the question was, during the last 12 months, on how many days were you bullied at school, or how many times? And you could see overall 16% of students were bullied in the school in the past, or reported bullying in school in the last 12 months. And you could see it's also something that has steadily risen since 2017. And it varies among age, with 11-year-olds reporting more than 14-year-olds, transgender individuals reporting more than females and males, LGBTQ+ individuals reporting more than heterosexual pairs, and then Alaska Native or American Indian reporting more than their counterparts, and then a split between Hispanic Latino and non-Hispanic Latino. Next slide. So this one is mostly talking about if you were bullied electronically. So the previous one was bullied at school. This one is bullied electronically. And you can see overall 6% of middle school students reported being electronically bullied in the past 12 months. One noticeable thing to look at would be in the 2021 to 2023 data. It decreased from 15% to 6% of those reporting being bullied electronically, as well as individuals who identify as transgender being significantly more likely than their peers to experience electronic bullying. And then for the final point there on race, American Indian, Alaska Native students were significantly less likely than their average middle student to have been bullied electronically. Next slide. So this is talking mostly about mental health, so it looks at different factors of mental health. So we ask about depression, engaging in self-harm, engaging in or considering suicide, and then attempting suicide. And you can see for depression, it dropped from 2021 from 26% to 20%. Engaged in self-harm dropped slightly from 17% to 16%. Considered suicide also dropped from 12 to 10%. And then attempted suicide stayed the same from 2021. And those are lower than the Massachusetts state average from 2021. But there are some noticeable differences there, or notable differences, where female and transgender students were significantly more likely to experience depression than the average middle school student. LGBTQ+ students were significantly more likely than heterosexual students who experienced depression, and Hispanic Latino students were significantly more likely than non-Hispanic Latino students to experience depression. Yeah. Yep. So then everything is scaled from there. It's just not marked on there. Oh, it's not marked on there, okay. Yeah, so it's 20% for experienced depression, 16% for engaged in self-harm, 10% for considered suicide, and 4% for attempted suicide. Yep. And then engaged in self-harm, gender minority students were significantly more likely than the average middle school student to engage in self-harm. LGBTQ+ students were significantly more likely than the heterosexual students to engage in self-harm. So gender minority students were significantly more likely than the average middle school student to consider attempting suicide, while sexual minority students were significantly more likely than heterosexual students to consider attempting suicide. Next slide. So this is asking about connectedness to school, so asking individuals, students, if there is at least one teacher or other adult in the school that you can talk to if you have a problem. So overall, when asked about adults, 64% of middle school students reported having at least one teacher or other adult in the school that they can turn to. One thing of note was for race. American Indian and Alaska Native students were significantly more likely than the average middle school student to have at least one teacher or other adult in the school that they could talk to if they had a problem. And you could kind of see the changes over time on the left, and then differences between grade, gender, sexual orientation, and race and ethnicity towards the right. Next slide. This is another question that's asking about how often individuals, students are typically participating in out-of-school programs. And you could see overall 68% of middle school students reported they typically participate in out-of-school programs 1 or more days per week. This was the first time that we asked this question, so there isn't any trend data previous to that. And some of the notable points here is sexual minority students were significantly more likely than heterosexual students to participate in out-of-school programmings, while students of another race were significantly less likely than the average middle school student to participate in programs. White students were significantly more likely than the average student to report participation. Ethnicity, Hispanic and Latino students were significantly less likely than non-Hispanic Latino students to report they participated in out-of-school programs. Next slide. Now this is my purview, substance use. So this is asking about if anyone has ever tried any of these substances. So this is lifetime use. This is just one-time use. And so you can see overall downward trend for most of the substances, except alcohol and vape, electronic vape products, where alcohol is staying the same and e-cigarette use increasing slightly. For the e-cigarette use, 11-year-old students were significantly less likely than the average middle school student to have ever used an electronic vape product, while American Indian and Alaska Native students and Asian students were significantly less likely than the average middle school student to have used an electronic vapor product. And Hispanic Latino students were significantly more likely than the non-Hispanic Latino students to have reported using an electronic vapor product. The next slide is going to look at current use of substance use. So this is within the last 30 days. And you can see relatively small amounts of reports of use overall, except for, I would say, the electronic vapor products, where there seems to have been a slight increase from 3% to 6%. And alcohol use with a 1% increase. And a very similar trend to the last slide for electronic vapor use in particular. 11-year-old students significantly less likely to report, as well as American Indian, Alaska Native, and Asian students, and Hispanic and Latino students. And then for marijuana use, 12-year-old students were significantly less than the average middle school students who have ever tried marijuana. Next slide focuses on sexual behaviors. So this is just simply asked, have you ever had sexual intercourse? And it's overall 2% of middle school students have ever had sexual intercourse. The slide on the left for the trend data, that's not supposed to say 20%. For 2013, that's supposed to say 8%. So it's 11% to 8%, and then down to 2% in 2023. And so gender minority students were significantly less likely than the average student to have had sexual intercourse, and then American Indian and Alaskan Native students were significantly less than the average middle school to report sexual intercourse. And then for the next one is nutrition. So it talked about over the past week, did you eat breakfast? And so 53% of the middle school students ate breakfast on 6 of the past 7 days, with Hispanic and Latino students significantly less likely than non-Hispanic and Latino students to report eating breakfast 6 out of the last 7 days. And then I think this might be the last one. Yep, next one is the last one. During the last week, how many days were you physically active for a total of at least 60 minutes per day? And overall, 44% of middle school students engaged in 60 minutes of physical activity on the last 5 of 7 days, with female students reporting significantly less physical activity for a total of 60 minutes per day than their peers, and Hispanic and Latino students significantly less likely than non-Hispanic to be physically active. So try to go through it quickly because it's a lot of information to digest, but happy to answer any questions based off of anything you see there. And then the full report will be available online, so you can see that anytime as well, probably by the end of the week.
Great, thank you so much for that presentation. I have Ms. Dion and then Dr. Phillips.
I have a question about, I think it was actually the very first part of the results, about students feeling unsafe on their way to or from school, especially because it seems like that's divided largely along ethnic lines, with a lot of Hispanic and Latino students skipping school because they feel unsafe. I'm wondering if there's like, does that question have any follow-up questions of like, what is making them feel unsafe, like who or what is causing them to feel unsafe now, because I'm wondering, is it like, you know, they're afraid of getting hit by a car, or they're afraid of being assaulted, or they're afraid of the police? Like, you know, I feel like I'm interested in knowing what or who these kids are feeling afraid of, because that's, you know, that's concerning that they're not going to school because there's something that's causing them to feel unsafe.
Sure. Yeah, I think, through the chair, I think the only challenge sometimes is the qualitative. Those are going to be more qualitative questions.
Right.
So we're actually trying to work with our evaluator, JSI, to think about how we can ask more of those questions that get a little more nuance than just like kind of the overall kind of buckets. But thank you.
I have Dr. Phillips and then Ms. Parrish.
Thanks. Through you, Chair. I think this is actually for the district administration, but I'm really stuck on the slide about connectedness that seems to be suggesting that almost 4 out of 10 of our kids don't feel like there's an adult at school that they can talk to about a problem. And I just think, right, we all think relationships are core to education, right? We had a presentation about our pre-K work, and relationships is like right up there of the 4 things we're focusing on. So I guess it's really concerning to me. I know it's not a new problem, and I'm just wondering, what are we doing to unpack and address it?
Dr. Kaman?
Through the chair. So we have a social emotional team that is, my understanding is that we have basically put in place multiple interventions. The restorative justice has been one way to actually look at what are the things that happen at the school level that need to be treated a little bit differently than more on the punitive side. So there is a conception around looking at behavior in a different way in terms of making sure that every child has a space to have a conversation about that. So there are some interventions that are in place. This data is not data that has come to my desk yet, in which we have gotten together and say, what are we going to do about this? Overall, the issue of belonging is one of the things that actually worries me a lot, and I think that, you know, the fact that we have places in which there are behavioral issues it points to a larger issue, which I think it has to do a lot with belonging. But I know that there are multiple. We have responsive classroom, and we have what's the other one? No, but restorative justice is actually, we are implementing restorative justice across the board, but we also have other systems that we're putting in place to address behavior in general from a perspective of a system. And so those are things that are happening. As far as the outcomes, we are implementation stages right now. So this is one thing that we always look at from the perspective of tier interventions. What are the kids who are needing more support, the kids who are not? I think that overall, in terms of belonging, I think that the students, you know, the large percentage of our students, 43% of them happen to, you know, our Hispanic students feel that there is an issue of belonging across the board. And as you said, other categories that are feel somewhat marginalized. But we will be looking at this. I mean, this is, in my mind, if you are not able to, you won't be able to get the benefits of learning if you are not feeling that you belong or you are part of the school.
So just out of curiosity, when are the students surveyed, and is it clear that their answers are anonymous?
Yes, yeah. So usually that's a good segue question. So as I mentioned, it has been alternating years where middle and high school have been surveyed in March, typically, of the school year. However, moving forward, we're actually going to move to a model where instead of doing alternating years, it would be 1 year of middle and high school being surveyed at the same time, with a second year being, or the off year, being an opportunity to do more in-depth analysis and best practice recommendations through JSI, our evaluator, or any evaluator we work with going forward. So to answer it in short, it's March, and it is very much well-known, and we actually have an intro video recorded by students that encourage it, not just participation, but also that your answers are anonymous and aren't going to be identified to you in any way, shape, or form. But we also want to incorporate an off year to do, and it's not really an off year because we'll still be doing work, but a non-administration year. So we don't just keep turning out the data, but not really putting it to good practice. And that's not what I meant, not good practice, but not putting it into motion, because it was always like, all right, let's go back to administration time for the next year, where now we can really focus on a whole year of identifying topics. That's where I actually was today, earlier, meeting with some of our teen empowerment youth that over in the dojo to ask them to identify key topics that they find, and we're going to be doing Somerville Positive Forces and other youth groups over the course of the next 2 weeks to identify top two, one for middle school and one for high school, for our evaluators to do a deeper dive of.
Great.
Starting in January.
Great. I had Ms. Barish and then Ms. Patone.
Thank you, Chair Krepchen. Through you, thank you for the presentation. Some of this is like it was, 2 years ago, including the safety and skipping school question that Ms. Dion brought up. And I would really encourage our administration to try and learn more about that. I'm not sure what the best way to go about that is, but I really think that, as we partner with other organizations in town, with other service providers in town, whatever we can do to help kids feel safe, and especially because the question is, it's like you feel unsafe either going to or from or at school. I mean, there's a huge amount of possibility there, and without more information, it's really hard to intervene, obviously. I was also curious about whether there's any, if you have this information, if there's any significant differences on response rates based on the school that students attend, because you mentioned that the data is cleaned based on, the way they started or didn't finish.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Do you know that?
Through the chair, no, I don't know off the top of my head, but I can certainly get that information. JSI stratifies it that way, but I think if there was any noticeable differences, they probably would have communicated that. And we tend to see higher participation rates, honestly, in the middle school than we do in the high school. So it's not something that's come up, at least in my time, but I can double check.
Ms. Patel?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Krepchen. I think this question probably goes to the administration. I also just want to compliment, I always find this really interesting and really feeds the work that everyone does here, so it's incredibly valuable, and so thank you for being here. I know we've been seeing this data pretty consistently. I'm going to talk specifically about physical activity for young women. And there's a very strong correlation between physical activity and mental health. And I really would be curious, and I don't know when we're going to have the capacity to do this work, but looking into what kind of programming we're doing for our middle grade students. I think we do some amazing program that's grown over the last probably 5 years around team sports, but I don't know how much we do with more individualized sports that maybe, I don't know, we'd have to investigate with the young women, more attractive to young women, such as yoga, dance, exercise class, running. I'm making some assumptions just because I have a daughter and I see these kids, but not every young man wants to participate in sports. So don't want to discredit the middle grade sports program. I love it, and I'm so excited that it's so much larger than it used to be. We have larger participation, but this is a space that mostly, for me, the correlation between physical activity and mental health. And we see this continuing trend from middle school as well as high school last year, where we saw this much lower number for young women and their physical activity. So it's something that I think would be worthwhile from a strategic standpoint to invest in and figure out what's going on and what kind of programming could we offer in partnership with the city or other partners to enhance this access, because we're living in a generation right now where kids do this all day long. We can all talk about that, but and things are easy to access. It could be beneficial. So, not that we don't have enough to do, but I'd love to see where this might fit into a longer range plan, and particularly focusing on young women. Thank you.
Mr. Green, did you want to follow up to that?
Yeah, I just want to build on Mr. Tone's point. I think it probably behooves us as a committee in the district to just really do some real deep thinking about our physical education outside programming from K through 12 and what our goals are. So like, you know, like when we invest in these things, what we expect to see. Like, I know that even in elementary grades, it is not always clear how families can engage with the programming that does exist, and it feels like we have a lot of programming, but it's not clear to me that we have a lot of strategy. I'd love to really dig into that.
Please.
Thanks to the chair. Thank you for the feedback. That's helpful to hear. I'll say that I work very closely with Nicole Veely, who's our K through 12 supervisor of physical education. I might have left something out of her title, but generally K through 12 supervisor of PE. And I know that she has done a lot of really great strategic planning around high school programming. So there are a lot of really amazing new offerings, some of which we spoke about at a school committee meeting previously around, you know, the different accessible basketball teams and things of that nature. So she's been really thoughtful about how students can be active and physically involved in ways that may be more aligned to what their hopes are and make them feel comfortable and sometimes align with different aspects of their identity, as mentioned, at the high school level. So it's a really great point and question to bring back to her, considering this data, what might this look like in a middle school model? Obviously, there are different limitations given the number of educators in the school day structure. That said, I think this is really, really great feedback, and I know that she's thinking strategically as this is now her first full year, not in an interim position in the role, so I think this is really great feedback that I will bring back to her. She doesn't supervise the team sports at the middle school level, but given that she was previously the athletic director, she's got a lot of knowledge around that and knows kind of the players, if you will. So I think she's usually more than happy and eager to kind of entertain and think through how this kind of the bigger umbrella of physical activity works. So thank you for the feedback, and I will definitely bring this back to her.
Mr. Green, and then Ms. Parrish.
To be clear, I don't think this is a staff level lack of strategy. I think it's or if it is, it's like at the superintendent office and the school committee level. This is a high level. When we invest in physical education, when we invest in athletics, when we invest in team sports, why are we doing it and what are we getting?
Ms. Parrish.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Ms. Patone, I think, you know, your point about the connection between physical activity and mental health makes a lot of sense. I noticed that Hispanic and Latino students were also less likely to engage in 60 minutes of physical activity and also had higher levels of depression. So I think there's, you know, a couple of trends that deserve more looking at. This is absolutely the kind of thing that I'll bring to Children's Cabinet because we're working on out-of-school programming. Not that physical activity has to happen out of school, but it's great when it does. So I will certainly share this there as well and see if there can be some really targeted interventions, you know, along with partners, not just Somerville Public Schools.
Dr. Carmona?
Through the chair, so I heard the question about systematic support around this. So I can tell you with certainty that every school improvement plan that I've seen highlights some goals around social emotional support, mainly around mental health though. And I just wanted to highlight for you that we still have significant issues that from the pandemic, which could be many other lingering effects, but we're still dealing with significant challenges with depression as well as issues of self-regulation. And so I know we have increased our number of counseling services that we have. We even are exploring other ways to provide more one-to-one and to eliminate some waiting lists. And so I feel that, you know, as much as because I want to also focus on other areas of support. I think the ones that are of immediate needs, like issues that actually impact behavior in the classroom, that actually might dysregulate a classroom, are things that are also very basic in terms of social-emotional. So I am going to need some support if we're going to also think about embarking on a process of looking at how else can we ask the schools to actually provide some more initiatives around physical activity. I am all on board for that, but I'm just trying to figure it out how else we add that for the focus of the principals that are, they have some significant tier needs for students who require significant support, and so that's just it gives me a little bit of anxiety when I hear this.
Ms. Patone and then Mr. Green.
Through you, Chair Corruption, just to follow up, my imagining had to do with the city and recreation. It is not just about the schools. And I know I'm not naive to say you let a kid exercise for 60 minutes a day and then somehow all their mental health problems are solved. They're not. But we do know that there's evidence that physical activity can really help someone's mental health. So I didn't assume that this was all going to come from the district. I believe that we really would have to partner, whether it was the city or outside partners. You know, it's kind of putting a lens. I'll just give an example. What are we offering our middle schoolers? Are there all team sports? Are we offering from the rec department anything within the schools after school, like yoga or dance? But the bottom line is it has to match up with what the students want. And so part of it is this inquiry, and that's where I think the schools have to support. So I think it's great that my colleague, Ms. Barish, brought up the idea of bringing it to cabinet. And this might also be a space where grants can come into play, where we could get outside monies to help support this kind of work. So I don't have a particular crystal ball. I could see something that maybe had broader offerings, but I do think it doesn't necessarily fall on all the shoulders of SPS. Does that make sense? So I hope your anxiety is not like outsized.
Mr. Green.
So I feel like it's just a standard disclaimer. I recognize that, we are, finally back in the education business after 3 years of being anything but. And so I know it feels like there's a backlog of things we want to look at. And so I recognize that we're creating a list of things we want to really study that is, 4 years in the making at this point, and probably, it all can't be done at once. So I want to state that, and I recognize that, and it probably means that in the new year we should sit down and actually, as a committee, do some priority setting and, figure out how we're going to manage this backlog of things that we just haven't had time to think about. And we finally do, but it all takes work.
Are there any other questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you again, Matt.
Appreciate it. Thank you again.
All right, Dr. Carmona?
Thank you, Matt. So that concludes the report from friends who are within the district and outside of the district. So the next is the superintendent's update. So I am going to start with a conversation about this time of the year. So it's December, is that right? We have November, we have Thanksgiving, we have December, we have... The season brings a lot of emotions around, expectations about perceive.
Just leave that here.
Thank you, Matt. So, sorry, but you're still packing up, is that right? So, yeah. And so a couple of things. So I think that this is a good time to think about how we can support each other. This is also a good time to think about, the time of giving. Is that right? There's a time of giving, time of community. That's one thing that we do as a district. We always provide students with jackets, with extra resources, with food. And so that's something that we will continue to do. And I would like to continue to expand those resources and supports. We ask the families that whenever they have those needs, that they reach out directly to us or reach out directly to our liaisons at every school. One thing I just wanted to highlight also is that, and I mentioned it to the principals in my last update, is that this is also a difficult time for many kids who have to grieve the fact that they might not have a home that looks like the one that is in a Hallmark card, or that they have a different makeup of their community. And so usually this is the time, and teachers know that in which a lot of behaviors come up. And in part is because there is also an absence of that grieving of not being able to fit or not being able to enjoy the holidays the same way that we traditionally, those families who have the benefit of having kind of an ideal model get to enjoy it on a regular basis. So I also ask for the community that if there are ways and they can support our efforts around that, please feel free to reach out to us, to reach out to the schools in case of there are resources that are extra. But I just wanted to highlight the commitment that we have for families, and we do that on a regular basis, but schools are the center at which they have the most direct understanding of the needs of every family. So I hope I'm not sounding too negative on this, but I just think that it's a really difficult time of the year for some families, and I hope that bringing a little bit of understanding and grace for those who struggle and those who don't have the resources is something that I would like to voice at this point. And again, I just want to make a commitment that schools are here for wraparound services and for as much as we can. So if we will need more, hopefully we will be reaching out to all of you, but I want to be clear that we will continue to do that the same way we always have done it. So that is part of the season. It's a season of celebrating, a season of giving, and also a season of understanding. Another celebration, there are many families that celebrate St. Nicholas, Bodhi Day, and Hanukkah. And so those are days that are coming up in this month. So again, I love the idea of pluralism, is not only understanding others or being patient or being accepting, but also engaging. And so these are times in which it's good for us to, as a community, to come together to also understand the needs of others. As a district, we always send to all our building principals language around ways to celebrate during this time of the year that is more understanding of other cultures. So we will continue to do so, but I also wanted to highlight that there are other celebrations this year, this time of the year. And Chad is not here, but our assistant superintendent for operations. But I'm going to have Dr. Jessica Boston provide the next updates.
Thanks. Through the chair. So I have a few highlights of just exciting things happening in the district that we would like to share, and then upcoming events, and finally a shout out. So the first of the three highlights is that we have some cross-curricular collaboration happening really across the district. This one happens to be from the high school. So one of our art teachers, Lindsay Richard, our world percussion teacher, Marcus Santos, photography teacher, Stan Marmish, collaborated to bring 3 classes together one morning in November recently. So the studio arts students in Miss Richards' class painted, while Mr. Santos's class inspired the artists with drumming, and while Mr. Marmish's class photographed and documented the event as it was happening. So it was just a really kind of magical, exactly what you hope to see, rich learning environment, and we just wanted to shout out those educators in that cross-curricular collaboration. We also want to say congratulations to the Kennedy debate team. The Kennedy School debate team won prizes in all divisions, 4 team awards, and 2 individual speaker awards, and placed 3rd overall in their inaugural debate tournament. So shout out to the Kennedy debate team. Those claps were both for the educators that I named before and the community debate team. I'm sorry, I didn't pause for applause, but I will for this one. So the SFLC Family Engagement Department partnered with Summer Promise and the Somerville Council on Aging in hosting an intergenerational story time at the Council of Aging at their facility on November 29th, which we partner, or we're in the same space now in the TAB building. So it was a collaboration between many city departments to build relationships across our generations. So shout out to them. So upcoming events. Students in grades kindergarten to grade 8 are invited to the Creative Computing Program on Wednesday, December 6th from 5 to 7 at Somerville High School. This is a STEAM event, and it's run by staff at the Somerville High School and by students. It's an opportunity for younger students to explore computer science and robotics in a fun and relaxed environment. So come on out for that on Wednesday. And also, as a reminder, the next open house is for schools pre-kindergarten through grade 8. Is this Thursday, December 7th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's, again, a chance for community members and families to observe classes, to meet staff, to learn more about our schools. And everyone is welcome and can learn more on our website. So you can learn on our website how you participate in that. As a reminder, December 6th is an upcoming half-day Wednesday for all students in grades pre-kindergarten through grade 8. And I will close with a shout out. And this meeting shout out is to shout out our Food and Nutrition Services Department led by Lauren Mancini. We really appreciate the complexity of the work done by this team and the office staff who work with vendors, governmental bodies, other SPS departments, and the labyrinth of accounting requirements to run this department. We also want to thank the staff working in our cafeterias, preparing food and servicing our students. So the Food Service Department and Nutrition Department continues to provide healthy and innovative and delicious meals for all of our students, and we thank you for your hard work and dedication. You really think about, those are the members of our team that we sometimes don't remember are so crucial to the well-being of our children and to our children doing well in the classroom academically and social-emotionally, just making sure they have a healthy, warm, nutritious meal. And so we really thank you, thank that whole department.
Just one reminder for everyone is that our community meeting that was supposed to happen tomorrow, December 5th, for the K-8 capacity study report, the conversation around that, has been moved to December the 19th at 6:30 p.m. at the high school. And it will be at the cafeteria, although in talking to Melissa Woods this afternoon, she said the space might be a little bit tight. So she was going to get back to me tomorrow to let me know if we might have to make an adjustment on the location on that. So sorry about a possible one more change, but right now, as we know it, is 6:30 p.m. on the 19th at the high school cafeteria. There will be pizza, refreshments, as well as the Parks and Recs will provide activities and games for students. And the reason why we moved that date is because just to make sure that it aligns with the decision that MSBA will be making on the middle of December, around December 13th. So we just wanted to have one conversation instead of having a hypothetical conversation. So that's just the one thing I wanted to remind everyone. Again, a change from the 5th to the 19th at the high school cafeteria. And just a quick update on the focus groups that I have been having with all faculty as well as the students, and tomorrow we'll be meeting with families at different places. So that work is continuing, and I'm really thankful for the work that has been done by Karen Woods and Amara in mobilizing faculty and the community to let me gather some data through their feedback. And that is the end of the reporting component of my session.
Great. Looks like Ms. Parrish, question?
I'm curious, congratulations, first of all, to the Kennedy debate team, but I'm curious about how many of our K-8s have debate teams and whether that's sort of based on availability and willingness of folks to supervise those groups, or if it's based on funding, anything you can tell me, because I've had inquiries from folks about establishing them in other schools.
Thank you, through the chair. The quick answer is I need to get updated for this year. I've followed it over past years, but I feel like I'm having a blank with the pandemic interruption. So if I may get back to you, by tomorrow with some update via writing, and you can share that out if that's helpful. Thank you.
And also, just to add to the event listing, the high school musical is this coming Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Kinky Boots. It's sure to be lots of fun. Yeah, of course. With that brings us to new business. So we have a motion here on parental leave benefits for non-union employees. Just to remind members, this was a vote we took in executive session back in January, and it's just being brought to us now for a public vote. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Patone, seconded by Mr. Green. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Next, we have a bunch of policies to be added and a few to be removed. Ms. Barish, would you like to speak to them for us?
I would love to.
Excellent.
So the first item on the agenda is student conduct, policy JIC. Our colleague, Dr. Phillips, proposed new language last spring, and Attorney Paige Tobin sent us a much simplified draft policy. We made some small changes to the language that she proposed in the Rules Subcommittee. The MASC reference policy and our existing policy are far more detailed, but it is Attorney Tobin's opinion that the details are appropriate for handbooks, and that the policy can be much simpler. As is generally the case, a simpler policy is more nimble. It allows for flexibility as regulations change and as best practices change. So that's the first one. And these are all for first readings, so I'm just going to kind of run through them if that's okay. If folks have questions, it's cool to interrupt in between. The next one is procurement requirements, DJE. MASC recommended changes to the policy, some of which Attorney Sumner suggested we leave as is. Finance Director Gorski asked that we consider raising the cap to $100,000, as state law now allows. Currently, it's $50,000. He feels that would make things simpler. Attorney Sumner's agreed. So that is incorporated in the language that you would see in the folder. The next item is civil rights complaint policy for child nutrition programs. Policy EFE, this is a new policy added by MASC per federal law. It's pretty straightforward. The next one is curriculum development and adoption, policy IGA-IGD. MASC recommended combining two existing policies into a single policy. Next, there is purchasing authority, which is policy DJA. Again, MASC recommended some small changes, which we are shown in the folder. Finally, service animals, policy IMGA, and I'm actually, due to an oversight on my part regarding our existing policy, I want to actually table this and send it back to rules for further review. I don't know if there's a procedure for that, or if this is it.
I think this is safely it, and we just won't bring it for a second reading next time.
Excellent. Are there questions, or should I go on to the next?
I will stop for a moment. I just had a quick question about the student conduct policy. This is really probably a question for the district and for me as chair, but I'm thinking aloud about the fact that it mentions again how the school committee is supposed to approve school handbooks, which is something we have never done in my time on school committee. And so I'm just bringing up for discussion, we should figure out a process for that. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on what that process might look like, but I'll just flag it for now.
Yeah, can we officially make that our goal to have a policy of that for next school year? Because we are out of compliance there, and we need to fix that.
Ms. Patone?
School committees can have their own goals. It doesn't always have to be just the district goals, so, you know, if you're making a motion to adopt this as a goal for next year, I second that.
Sure, so moved. That the school committee officially establish a goal of having a procedure for handbooks for the 24-25 school year.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Green, seconded by Ms. Patone. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Okay, with that, back to our next policy. Ms. Parrish?
That was all of the policies. The next item on the agenda is removal of policies. Shall I carry on? Okay. So additionally, the Rules Committee recommends removing 3 policies from our manual. The first is IGA, curriculum development, and the second is IGD, curriculum adoption, because as I just mentioned, MASC recommended combining those 2 policies. So I suppose once we vote on whether to adopt that policy, we would vote on getting rid of those or removing those from our manual. The other policy we recommend removing is EBCR, the evacuation policy. This is actually a procedural document with the specific evacuation locations listed. EBC, emergency plans, would remain in the manual, and that policy is the policy that requires the superintendent to develop and maintain an emergency plan for every school in the district. So the only one we're recommending removing is the very specific, this students at this location would go to that location in this situation.
Great.
That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Green.
In the absence of a policy on how we remove things, I assume we'll follow the same 2 reading thing voted next week?
Yeah, I think so. Ms. Patone?
Thank you. Through you, I'm curious, I understand that some of these are going to become district level policies versus, or procedures versus school committee policies. Where are we going to publicly make those things like that available, or are we not? So like we have our whole school committee manual, but I've found that it's kind of hard sometimes to find the district policies, and we don't have a common place to keep them all, unless I'm missing something.
Ms. Parrish?
Are you asking generally, or are you asking like specifically about EBCR?
This one brought it to my mind. Is like often we say, well, that's not a school committee policy, that's a district policy, or that's a school policy. And we do have the handbook, the parent handbooks. I don't know where something like that would live in the event that someone wanted access to that. Or maybe that's not important. I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think for the record, with this policy, the reason we're removing it as a policy is because it shouldn't be public.
Yeah, okay. Well,
so, but separately to your question, I think there's a larger question of, can we ask the district to make those kinds of policies that are district policies more easier to find on the website?
Through the chair, yeah. So I think we could be, if we can be more specific about what are some of the ones that, because I think that there are some, but that's a question for, that might be also an issue of web design or an issue of, so I don't know exactly what it is that we're talking. If it's an issue of the content itself that is missing, or the accessibility of that. So. I think that's just if the question is there anything specific that should be advertised or should be shared more visibly, then I can start looking at that.
Yeah, I don't have a specific answer. I just know this often comes up. This does not belong as a school committee policy. We all decide yes or no. It's a district policy, and then I don't know what happens to it. Or I don't know if anybody else knows what happens to it. It probably sits on somebody's drive somewhere, or there's probably a littering of a bunch of things on all different kinds of public drives, and maybe it might be worthwhile to actually have it in a consolidated space. Particularly, it's the type of thing that's systemic, so that it doesn't depend on on an individual. So again, I don't have a specific one. I'm almost just earmarking this idea because it's come up several times in the last several years for me personally, and I guess for Ms. Barish, who's also nodding. And I agree, not everything is going to be made public, but something should be, and it's just something to kind of have a mark for and think about how we might want to do that in the future.
Ms. Barish?
Through you, I think in the recent cases I can think of, so, we did vote on the policy about an expanded campus, but it could have simply lived in the handbook. Similarly, the details of student discipline, if they are removed from our policy, would live in the handbook. I think in most cases where this has come up, it's been sort of this is something that could just be in the handbook. In that way, it would be shared with families and the community, and it doesn't need to be at the school committee policy level.
Through the chair, yeah. So that's what I was trying to get an understanding of what exactly we were talking about, because if you think about like the equity policy, like it lives under the equity. If you go under the equity department, you find it easily. But I'm just trying to be helpful in terms of like what is the thing that might live independently on a different section of the website. But I think when it comes to student access and student-specific content, the handbook usually provides that information. But again, I'm curious as to if there's a specific theme or content that needs to be elevated in a different way. I'm definitely open.
No, that's a good point, and I'll keep my eyes and ears open because, like I said, there's been several instances, but I can't name them right now. But I know of them, and some of them are just things that maybe at the high school it's easier to put it in the high school handbook when it's like a district policy or it's a little bit different. So I'll keep my eyes and ears open.
Okay. Any other questions about these policies for a first reading? Okay, they will be on our agenda next meeting for a second reading. That brings us to a Children's Cabinet update. Do you have one for us, Ms. Barish?
I do, thank you. So as you heard in Kathleen Baylor's presentation, you heard her presentation, and that work is an awesome example of the type of work that the Children's Cabinet supports. For those who aren't familiar with that body, which may just be folks at home, but I'll give you a review. The Somerville Children's Cabinet was formed in 2017 with the support of the By All Means initiative, the Education Redesign Lab at Harvard Graduate School of Education. The Cabinet shares the aim of the By All Means initiative to develop comprehensive child well-being and education systems that help eliminate the link between children's socioeconomic status and achievement, and is guided by the 6 conditions of collective impact: a common agenda, shared measurement, mutually reinforcing activities, continuous communication, backbone organization, which in Somerville is Summer Promise, and equity as a priority. This fall, the Children's Cabinet has been working on the expansion of out-of-school time programming, particularly with 1 o'clock Wednesday dismissals beginning next year in mind. I'm pleased to share that the city will be adding an OST coordinator to the Summer Promise Department to support out-of-school time system development in collaboration with SPS. I don't know the details on when that hire is expected to be finalized, but it certainly, I think, will help with things that we talk about a lot in this room. Any questions?
Ms. Patone?
Thank you, through you. I don't know if this is for administration or is you as a representative on the Children's Cabinet. One thing that we've discussed is there's been this investment from the city for out-of-school time of $500,000. I know some of it went to direct programming, which is really exciting. I keep advocating for some of it to go to strategy, and I don't know if there's a plan to do that, if there's a plan to do that internally, to bring someone from the outside, but I think if we're gonna have all that money, I would love to invest some of that into more long-term planning as opposed to only creating more seats, although obviously that's very important. So I'd just be curious, and if you don't have an answer for that today, that's fine. Thank you.
Dr. Carmona?
Through the chair, yes, the after-school programming is one that is going to require multiple efforts, and one of those would be at the strategy level as well. I know that, many folks in our department are actually jumping into the conversation around the complexities that are coming next year. My hypothesis is that many of the families that will be impacted by the WINS, the early release, will be the families that actually also struggle the most with providing that kind of services and resources for kids. So I am extremely worried about a comprehensive response, and I know Chad is not here, but I know Chad as well as Jess, we're combining efforts to make sure that, and Amara Anosiki, the new chief of staff, is also joining in that conversation. So I totally echo your concern and your need to be very strategic along the lines of having a comprehensive program.
Ms. Patel?
Thank you, through you, Chair. I think this also highlights what Mr. Green had said, which is the priorities. And we recognize that there's a lot of things that, particularly in this horseshoe, that we ask for, and they're not all necessarily realistic, or maybe realistic in this timetable. I do think out of school time has this added pressure because of this significant change where we're going to be releasing kids early every Wednesday for the coming school year, so that puts some additional pressure on. But if I certainly don't want to put our leadership in the position where they're, they only have 3 bags, but we're giving you 7 bags worth of rice to put in your 3 bags. So if there's a conversation that we need to have, particularly at the beginning of the year, around, how do we prioritize these different initiatives and focuses, because obviously there are a lot of energy is going to get spent on buildings and is being spent on buildings right now, appropriately so. Let's figure out a place to have this conversation. Maybe it's in a mini retreat. I don't know. I know you guys have discussed having that. But I certainly would never want to be part of compounding the problem by putting too much on our administration in terms of the capacity to do that. And that's why I'm always, where appropriate, advocating for, if we bring in partners, if we bring in consultants, where we can manage them, I'm supportive of that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, Ms. Batone, do we have a building committee report?
Yes, it was not distributed, but I did send it in late, so I apologize for that. I can give a quick summary.
Sure.
I won't read the whole update because there's a lot of things. Just a reminder to everybody, this is a city council meeting, so if people want to know what's going on, there's minutes get published like about a week after, and it also is recorded, so anybody can watch this meeting. So it's a city council hosted meeting where school committee members are invited. Myself, Sarah Dion, and Emily Ackman are the 3 members that participate. We also generally have some representation from the SPS, either Assistant Superintendent Mazza or the superintendent comes to attend this meeting, as well as city staff that participates. There was a couple, I guess, categories. One is about school system upgrades. This has to do with mechanical systems, so HVAC, roofs, building envelopes. There's been a great deal of energy from the city to invest in our buildings, and it is quite a relief, but also quite overwhelming because there's a lot of need and there's been a lot of deferred maintenance. So what this committee does is, sits down with the city staff and talks about where we are with things. So the couple of things from an upgrade standpoint are, I don't know if people know, the Kennedy School has been working on a temporary chiller that is problematic primarily because it's very loud and it causes sound issues, I think, for the school community as well as the neighboring community. And we got the news, I think in October, that we're going to have that temporary system for 1 more cooling season. So just to let everybody know, because of the lead times to get the equipment. And one of the things that was brought up, particularly by City Councilor Gomez, was the fact that it took 1.5 years to put together this design. And that moving forward, that's going to be really challenging as we look at all of our buildings and do these types of upgrades. So I was really appreciating that she was pointing that out. The next 2 schools that are on the list for system replacements are the Healy and the West Somerville. And so again, they're looking at HVAC, they're looking at roofs, and she's actually specifically requested to look at building envelopes. And right now, I think with the West, they're in design and development, and at the Healy, they're in conceptual design. So that's a little further back. And they just, let's see if there's anything else important. So again, and the thing that the city emphasizes that because of the sustainability goals, there has been a larger scope. So we're not replacing in kind. So we're not taking one system and putting the exact same system in. They're doing different things to create more efficiency. So they're adding some heating capacity to have more efficiencies in the shoulder seasons. They're doing a lot of really important things for the city in terms of, for lack of a better word, decarbonization, but it's taking longer than people want it to take. So that's the summary for that bit. Regarding decarbonization plans for the school buildings, there's actually a group in the community that's really putting pressure on the city to create these type of plans, particularly for school buildings. The city council asked for a report on that, and they gave a lot of information about solar, which is great. So they talked about which buildings are set up to have solar panels, what kind of is a little bit of their timeline about where they might move forward with solar, but they didn't talk about other types of possible technologies. And so what came up in this meeting was that there's no strategic plan for the school buildings in particular around decarbonization, and Director Raich talked about putting that in the budget for the next fiscal year, which I think is positive and a good thing. We talked about that there's grants out there and all these good resources to address these things. We talked about the central kitchens for the schools. If people don't realize, the Winter Hill was our central production kitchen, and when the Winter Hill went down, we lost that kitchen. Currently, the East Somerville Community School is the temporary production kitchen, but they don't have the same level of capacity and capabilities as the Winter Hill did. And just so people understand, the central kitchen is more about which Assistant Superintendent Mazza talked about from scratch cooking, as opposed to where our site locations are more about reheating, although they do some cooking from scratch at the sites, is my understanding. So there is tentatively, not tentatively, the plan is to move the production kitchen to the Argenziano. And their goal is to have it up and running for the start of the 2024 school year. But we have not seen a plan. We haven't seen a timeline. We also had a quick, and so that's one of the actually themes in this meeting, is that through these many building issues, there might be like, hey, this is the next step, this is where we are in the process, but there are no plans and timelines. And so we had a good conversation about, there's a much higher expectation, both from the community and from City Council and School Committee, to want to actually have timelines and accountability, and recognizing that sometimes things will go out and sometimes things will change, and that's the nature of the beast of construction. We all understand that, but there was a real emphasis in saying, like, look, we have a higher standard right now, and we want the city to meet that higher standard. Let's see. Winter Hill Community Innovation School, we didn't, I know we've talked about it a lot, so I won't hit it too much, but there was a question about whether or not that gym could be used, because there's always a demand for indoor athletic space. And Director Raich pointed out that there are fall hazards, so areas in the building that were identified that they're at risk for the same type of thing that happened in the stairway, for concrete to fall, and said, and unless and until there are plans to remediate these areas, that building's not going to be used. But he didn't commit that there were those plans, and so that's a thing to follow up on. And I don't want to get too much in the master planning, because I know you guys covered it a lot, but re-emphasizing the idea, the meeting is moved from to December 19th, and the fact that encouraging families from all schools and community members to be part of this conversation, because it is not only about what should we do for the future of where our Winter Hill community will be and where the Brown community will be. It's an impact on the whole district, so it's a more strategic look. And I'm almost done. And there was a conversation about the Prop 2.5 override as a ballot question, and Director Raich stated that it is not realistic to do that this fall. Now, I don't know if that's in line with what everyone else thinks, but he put that, and there was a request, because he said that there needs to be a full design, or at least a schematic design, and a hard cost estimate for the work, and he believed that was unrealistic for September 2024. And it was requested by the committee that this gets documented in writing to City Council and the school committee and the general community. So people just didn't want it verbally, like, put this in writing so we have something to work from. And part of the last two items are school building repairs and maintenance. So DPW, we're creating a system for there's more reporting and more transparency in terms of the types of repair and maintenance that are going on our buildings to create more trust in the community. We were supposed to be getting quarterly reports. We hadn't gotten one for about 6 months. We got a year-to-date report. So that is on the City Council website. If anybody, I'll forward it to the superintendent's office just to make sure everybody's got what they are doing. And this is not every single 311 call, that's just the high level. So I think that's really important that that is out in the community. There's been conversations about putting together a website, and DPW is in the process of doing, I think, an RFP for that work so that they'll have their own website to make this information public and more transparent, which is super exciting. And I'm really appreciative that the administration is prioritizing that. And then we also discussed how within SPS, through the Assistant Superintendent Mazza, there's been much more centralized activity around 311 reporting. So instead of everybody and their brother reporting, there's an individual who's the point person and puts that forward, and there's a lot of collaboration between DPW and SPS around prioritizing. So that's a positive thing. And almost last but not least, contingency planning for school buildings. So way back in January, the school committee put together a resolution that was partially about, we're not going to move forward with making a decision about the 1895 until we know that there's plans for the Winter Hill building and the Brown building, and oh, by the way, contingency plans in case a building goes down. Well, obviously that happened this year. We had a building go down. We had to move into the Edgerly. So there was definitely an intense conversation about how important it is moving forward that there is a contingency plan in the event that one of our other buildings partially or fully has to go down for a period of time. So Director Race discussed that there's some assessment and viability work being done on the Cummings, as well as we're in discussions with St. Clemens. And again, this committee is requesting something more formal. A timeline is when we would actually have some type of contingency plan. What it looks like, it's up to them, whether it's the Cummings, what it would take to put the Cummings online, whether it's St. Clemens, whether it's modules, understanding what we would do in the event that a piece or a whole building went down, as opposed to having to react in the moment. So I think that's really important. I think that's something that the school committee voted on back in January as a resolution. Obviously, everyone went in crisis mode to address the Winter Hill, but I think bringing this back on the table is super important. The last item, really brief, Councilor Beatriz Gomez-Muacad is stepping down, and so there was just a bit of moment of thanks. She's been an incredible advocate for our building. She has so much professional expertise in the construction space. She has very high expectations regarding construction and meeting concern of residents. So I just wanted to say that publicly to this committee to thank her for her work. She's been a great partner, particularly trailblazing with me in terms of how do we work together as school committee and city council, because there really aren't ways to do this very formally. So she's been a great collaborator. And that's it. I apologize that I went through a lot, but this was multiple meetings, and I think these things were really important to say publicly, and some of these things you may or may not have heard before.
It's super helpful and much appreciated. Dr. Phillips.
First of all, thanks for this really comprehensive report and summary. I really appreciate it. I have a bunch of questions, but my first one is there anything happening or getting presented at the 1219 meeting that hasn't yet been presented to school committee?
Just to clarify, you're asking, is there anything that's presented in this meeting that hasn't presented?
It seems like Rich gave you guys an outline of what's happening on the 19th. My question is if there's anything in that list that we haven't gotten yet.
I don't think so. I mean, I'll send you the document.
I think Dr.
Sorry, go ahead.
Carmona wants to speak to that.
Through the chair. Yes, there are a few different things. The emphasis on the enrollment study, I don't think we have done a comprehensive assessment at the level that we'll be sharing on the 19th. The gap analysis, I think that we haven't done also a description of what it means for all the schools. And also the discussion around what are the possible sites and what are the different scenarios of the possible future location for the Winter Hill. So I think that is unique, unless I don't think you had that conversation from listening to this
We did. It was in the write-up. I just figured it
Okay.
was the same as what you said. The other thing, may I
Yep.
apologize.
Yep.
I think you mentioned, or maybe he mentioned, that there actually is going to be some opportunity for community discussion in this meeting, as opposed to it just being all presentation, which I think would be really valuable. Can you speak to that?
Correct. So that the other piece that is not present is the kickoff of the management or the leading of the community engagement process. So that's something that will be facilitated, and we'll be basically engaging the community on that. Yeah.
Dr. Phillips?
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up. I'll email the mayor about this. I think it is a mistake not to present things to the school committee first. I think not bringing us along is a real political risk for this entire process, right? If I don't like the way things are going, I think the mayor wants to know that before she goes out in public and before I go out in public to talk about it, right? Now, I'm not saying I'm going to do that, right? That's like me being hyperbolic, but I do think bringing us along every step of the way is really important, and this doesn't seem to be happening. And I keep talking about it, and I'm not sure what I need to do. So I'm going to write the mayor and try to make that happen, but I'm concerned about it.
Through the chair. I don't know exactly the specifics of the information that you are alluding to, because my understanding is that, I guess I wasn't there, Chad was supposed to be there, but I don't think that there was a direct conversation around the different models or the different possibilities for the future of this new construction. So I don't think that there was none of that. All the other information that was described is information that is generic in nature, so I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
I think she's just generally talking about whatever it is the city is going to be presenting on the 19th, separate from Ms. Patone's presentation. Dr. Phillips would appreciate the mayor bringing to us before presenting it publicly for all the reasons. And I'm sorry to put words in your mouth. Go ahead.
Reiterate, right? Like, I think it's really important that the leadership of the district see the models being presented to the community, and that the mayor and the city and infrastructure and asset management know what the district leadership thinks before they get out there in front of the community, because they don't want to be in a position where we're not happy and they're trying to sell it to the community.
Ms. Patone?
Through you, Chair Krupchen. Thank you, Dr. Phillips, for bringing that up. I agree. It's a tricky bit, right? How do you manage, there's a difference between seeing a slideshow and being presented to, and that is real. So someone gets a slideshow, they see things in a slideshow, and they go, holy cow, like all of a sudden they want to, build a 15-story building on top of this building, or whatever the proposal is. Or there's going to be multiple ideas, obviously. I don't know if there's consideration. We have a meeting the day before, and one idea is to have that presentation at that meeting and then do the same presentation on Tuesday, and allowing, I don't know if that's enough time, but, or just providing the slides beforehand. That's another thing that can be done. So I agree, although I know, or I don't know, I would like to think that this is factual and not opinion, in terms of like the consultants worked with the city and came up with all the options and said, A is around this dollar and B is around. That should be data-based as opposed to opinion-based, but we'll see. So, do you understand what I'm saying? That's just some feedback to the superintendent's office to have discussions with the city about how can previewing be used, particularly for the school committee administration. And possibly also, I'm a big fan of previewing the community. I'm not a big fan of just showing up and showing something that nobody's seen, but that's me and that's how I like to operate. But that's just something to consider.
Ms. Parrish?
Through you to Ms. Patone, a couple of times you mentioned, HVAC system redesign, and installation, development, et cetera. And I think I remember that Dr. Phillips asked earlier in the year sort of about air quality standards for our buildings in this new phase of the COVID pandemic. And I think personally, and more generally, just in general, what is the quality of our air in our school buildings? And I've also gotten questions about the Brown School because it is significantly different from the other schools, whereas it does not have a real HVAC system. I'm wondering, Ms. Patone, if those specific issues have been raised in this meeting. I don't need to know what was said. If they have, I'm happy to look through the minutes. They have not.
Not in any significant way, but it's certainly something that I can bring to whoever is the new chair, which we don't know yet, of the building committee to consider for a board order, because that's the process as we suggest, and the city councilors decide whether or not they want to make a board order out of something, which they do usually.
Dr. Phillips?
I actually asked to put that on the agenda for the next Finance and Facilities Committee meeting. I'd wanted to do it in November, but Chad needed more time to get the city there, so we'll be doing it at this one. So I'll either tell you what happened or you can come listen.
Awesome.
Dr. Carmona?
No, I was going to respond to that. I know that question came up in the last meeting, and I know Chad was going to follow up, so I just wanted to make sure that there was a follow-up on that. So you said it was going to be coming in at what time, what meeting?
The Finance and Facilities meeting.
Okay, yeah.
Great. Dr. Phillips?
Sorry, I got a lot of questions about buildings. This is just a clarifying one. In your report, they said, you're reporting that Rich said that planning will address building concerns for the entire school system. And I'm just wondering, is he talking about like just, are we gonna have enough space for every kid? What is he talking about?
Can you say that again? Sorry. Through the chair.
Sorry, in your summary of kind of the report out about the K-8 master plan, there's a line in there that says planning is going to address building concerns for the entire school system. And I was just wondering what Mr.
Dr.
Rich
Carmona
meant.
has a response.
Can I respond to it? Because I know with this. So the enrollment study and the gap analysis is something that alludes to all the buildings, all the pain points that we have throughout the district, and the numbers are the numbers, right, for the entire district. So the solutions that are being conceived, that are being thought out, again, there are multiple set of solutions. What they have to encompass the challenges that we have in other buildings. And so if you look at in the gap analysis, there are challenges. The Kennedy has challenges in terms of spacing. The East also has challenges. We have there's capacity and enrollment, and we have over-enrollment in some of them. So that, not only that, but most of the schools actually with the after-school programs or the out-of-school time also have some limitations. So the solution that is being conceive of has to encompass the needs of the district across the board, not just the solution for the Winter Hill and the Brown. So that's why the question is, we want to make sure that everyone is part of this, not just the families of the Winter Hill and the Brown.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, that brings us to, we have one report of subcommittees. I think Ms. Barish essentially covered everything during the talk of the policies, but I will entertain a motion to accept that report.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Dion, seconded by Ms. Barish. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. That brings us to items from committee members. Dr. Phillips.
I just want to put out there that school committee office hours are underway. They're on the website. We have switched our virtual meetings from Zoom to Teams. My understanding is we are all sharing one Teams link, but I wanted to just make sure nobody had any questions because we've never used this system before.
Ms. Dion.
Yeah. So how, what do we do?
understanding, and Anna, please correct me if I'm wrong, is you just click on the link on the website or copy
Just in the spreadsheet, the one that just says public teams link?
Yep, same link. It's also the one on the district website, and it should just take you right to Teams.
Okay. All right. And then you just join meeting? Okay. And I just went in and changed the time of my one this Wednesday. I don't know if that can be put onto the website.
I'll follow up. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And big thanks to Anna for setting up the Teams link. I think it's going to be just a huge step forward for us.
Great. Are there any other? Yes, Ms. Paton?
Thank you, through you. This was actually an item, I'm not going through all of the items from, I had office hours on Saturday, which were lovely with Senator Jalen and State Rep Eiderhoven and City Councilor Bea Gomez, as well as the incoming City Councilor. It was very nice. But one topic that came up pretty hot and heavy was about students getting to the Winter Hill at the Edgerly, and the concerns about crosswalks, the concerns about crossing guards, the concerns about snow removal, concerns about lighting for the underground passes, that like for the bike path, et cetera. I'm just flagging it because I am going to email and let you know. I think the most important thing is to understand what has transpired from your standpoint in the superintendent's office, so that I can share that information with the state senator and state rep, so they understand what has already transpired. Because I know you guys have put some energy in this work, and nobody wants dueling banjos. Everybody wants to be singing the same song. So I will email you and ask for an update. Thank you.
Are there any other items? And I believe we do not have any condolences. So with that, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.